Well, hello. Welcome back to The Christian Next to You. On today's episode, I am here with my friend Tyler, and he is going to tell us about who he is and where he's come from to now being the Christian next to you. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tyler, and I hope you get to know him a little bit better. This podcast, The Christian Next to You, is brought to you in partnership with the Ministry League Network. If you're someone who's looking for some resources to help you grow in your knowledge, to help you in your walk with the Lord, the Ministry League is the right place for you. If you have a phone that can connect to an app store, type in your app store Ministry League. You'll see their logo there, and you can download that app, and all those resources will be made available to you. If you don't want to download the app, that's okay. Just go to your web browser and type in ministryleague.com, and you'll find all those resources there as well. I am so thankful for the Ministry League Network and the work that they are doing in the kingdom, and I'm excited about our partnership together. With that being said, let's hop into the next episode. Well, welcome back to another episode of The Christian Next to You. I'm here with my buddy Tyler King. Tyler, go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe how old you are, if you're married, what you do right now.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Tyler King. I currently live in Denver, Colorado. Is where I've been born and raised. I've lived in a couple other states. I've lived in Oklahoma, small town called Duncan, just for a few months. And then I also lived in Paris, Tennessee, which is kind of the western part of the state for a couple months. Born and raised in Colorado. This is home to me. I'm married to my high school crush and my middle school crush and my elementary school crush, Natalie. And we don't have any kids. We've got a golden retriever, so he's kind of a mess on his own. But that's just kind of who we are and where we're from.
Cool. How old are you guys?
Yeah, I am 27, and my wife Natalie is 26.
Cool. And so, how long have you been back in Denver? I know you said you've born and raised, but I know what was your last move and how long have you been back in Colorado for?
Yeah, so after I graduated from Bear Valley, I moved to Tennessee. Was out there for about 6 months, from June to basically the end of November, early December. That was 2017, and so I've been back in Denver since 2017.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about what you do with Bear Valley. I can see that you're wearing a BV staff shirt, which that's weird to see because I was in class with you. That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about your work there and what you do.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag of a couple other things, other than just being staff. Obviously, we all kind of share different loads and different tasks. But my main department that I work with is development, and so that entails kind of the best way that I explain it to people is the bridge between the initial want of being in school and actually coming to school. So say someone says, I want to go to Bear Valley. Well, I'm kind of the in between that makes that happen. So I figure out housing, I figure out finances, support, all of that kind of stuff, help people through their steps and their journey to coming to Bear Valley. Um, so that's kind of what I do. I also teach 3 classes. So I teach 2 classes on Monday nights, Old Testament survey and the book of Isaiah. And then I teach 1 class to the undergraduate, and that is the Gospel of Luke.
Man, that's really cool. Do you enjoy it? I assume.
Oh yeah, yeah. Teaching is you'll find preachers who say that they like preaching better than teaching or teaching better than preaching, and I enjoy both of them. But I really love the classroom. I love the academic side of things. I love studying. I've just kind of developed into a nerd. I was never super athletic, so I guess that was just kind of written in the stars that I would sit in an office and just read all day. So that's kind of what
Yeah.
I do.
Now, something special about you that I don't know if it's ever been done before, but after you came back to Bear Valley, you enrolled in the master's program. How long did it take you to get through the entire master's program, and maybe tell people the usual time to get through it and how many courses and stuff it is?
Yeah. So the max amount of years I think is 6 years to get through the master's program. That's then we kick you out and you got to restart. Usually people do it in about 2 to 3 years. I just wanted to get it done, and so I did it in a year. So I graduated in
That's cool.
2017. Was kind of in shambles all throughout 2017. I did one class in 2017, and then when I moved back to Colorado, I just knocked it out in a year. So
I
I
just
love
pretty
learning.
much wanted to confirm the fact that you are a nerd, and so that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to
Oh
bring
yeah.
it
There's no doubt.
up. That's so funny, man. That is really that's I mean, that's awesome. There's no way I could ever do that. So props to you. Cool. So you
Yeah.
live in Colorado. You're newly married relatively
Yep.
to Natalie. Tell us a little bit about why you do what you do today at Bear Valley. I know you said you got into ministry. Have you always wanted to do ministry? Have you always been a Christian? Maybe walk us through your story, maybe going back to as far as you can remember with your faith.
Yeah, so that's kind of a loaded question, so I'll try and be as brief as I can about that. I know preachers really love to get on tangents, and um, preachers love to talk, so I'll try and keep that to a minimum. Raised in the Church of Christ, probably fourth or fifth generation Church of Christer. I mean, we've got family roots that go all the way back to when the name was given in 1906 with the American census. So it's just kind of natural for me to be in the Church of Christ. My grandpa was an elder at one of the congregations up here in Denver. My dad has been actively engaged as a deacon for a long time. My mom is the secretary at Bear Valley Church of Christ. So people don't call about the preacher's kids, but I was the secretary's kids. So I probably knew more than what I should have about the congregation. So that's kind of my upbringing. Good household, nothing really ordinary or unique about it. Just kind of just your plain Jane Church of Christ household. Grew up there. Grew up in Castle Rock, which is about 40 minutes south of Denver. Um, and then high school, I started to kind of drift away from the faith a little bit. I was initially baptized in seventh grade, and it was really more out of a fear of going to hell. I didn't want to go to hell, which is an okay reason to get baptized. There's definitely more to it than that, but
Right.
that was my motivation. Was I don't want to go to hell, so I'm going to get baptized and be saved. And then college is where things started to take a turn, really for a darker side of things. So when I went off into college, all of my friends, they were going to OC, Harding, Freed Hardman, and they were staying in kind of the Christian circles. Even though those colleges won't guarantee you to keep your faith, they certainly encourage you and give you that atmosphere. Well, I chose to go to Lincoln College of Technology, not a faith based organization, not a Christian school, very much a worldly school. It's not a party school, but it's a trade school. So you're dealing with a lot of rough people. Um, so I went 8 months there, got my certificate and graduation of metallurgy and welding tech. So basically, all that means is I know kind of the chemical makeups of different metals: Inconel, Hastelloy, stainless steel, carbon, aluminum, all that good stuff. And then I went straight into a welding job in Boulder, Colorado. And Boulder, to my best uh, knowledge, is Sodom and Gomorrah of America. I mean, we talk about Vegas, but Boulder is, you think about a lot of kids who are college age, who love to party, who don't have their parents for the first time in their life. I mean, things are crazy up in Boulder. That mixed in with a very atheistic, agnostic group of people. So that was kind of my work environment for the better part of a year. And during that year, I could see myself just kind of fading from the church, where I was going to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. Again, born and raised Church of Christ, so that's what's natural to me. And there would be Sundays where I would sleep in and say, I don't really feel like going to church.
Hmm.
Just not feeling it. And being a millennial, we're feelers. We love to feel things. So I wasn't feeling that, so I didn't do it. And then being around kind of a hostile environment toward Christianity, I remember having a couple conversations with some of my coworkers about faith or religion. I worked both early mornings and graveyards at times. So the factory that I was working in is called Emerson. They're a Fortune 500 company. Great company. They take care of their employees, but it was a around the clock work system, working mandatory overtime at times. So
Hmm.
really hard work environment to be a Christian in, especially when they would tell you, hey, we're working overtime. It's going to carry on into Sunday. Well, then you're choosing work over assembling with the saints. all that to say, I eventually just stopped going to church, just kind of gave up on faith and everything else. And my whole childhood just kind of faded in terms of being a Christian. And if anyone has engaged in a blue collar work or has done blue collar work, I mean, painting, carpentry, you get a lot of time to yourself to think about things. And I remember one night I was sitting there welding and I thought, if I were to die right now, where would I go? And that scared me because I knew there was a God. I never reached the point of being an atheist or and not agnostic. I just reached the point of kind of complacency.
Mm.
And it's really this idea of a generational faith. I was raised in the church. My parents were raised in the church. And so I adapted what they were doing, but it never became a personal faith. And so now was that hard transition between generational and personal. So uh, I remember sitting myself thinking, okay, I was raised in the Church of Christ. What if that's not the truth? What if that's not what I need to be doing? So I scrapped all my theology. I scrapped everything that I knew growing up, and I said, I'm going to study. And if this denomination or if this doctrine is true, then I'm going to hold fast to that. Reject Church of Christ. Reject all of that. I'm going to tell my family. I'm going to tell my friends, even if they reject me. That's the truth that I'm going on. So over the course of about 2 to 3 months, I sat down and studied different doctrines, different denominations, all these different things in pursuit of the truth. Eventually, my path led back to the Church of Christ is true. Everything that we've been doing, it's in the Bible, and everything that we don't do, it's because it's not in the Bible. And so, for me, this was a monumental point in my life where I was stoked because I knew what truth
Yeah.
was. And up to this point, I was just kind of following a generational faith. So, all that to say, I went to my supervisor. He had just given me a raise 2 weeks prior to it. I remember walking in his office and handing in my 2 weeks notice. And his comment was, did we not give you enough in your raise? I said, no, you guys were very generous with that. It's not about money. It's just about kind of a new turning point in life. And so that's when I came to Bear Valley, went through the 2 year program here, did the master's program, just completed a degree at Heritage Christian University, and now I'm at Denver Seminary doing a Master of Divinity in Old Testament. So I think I kind of overcorrected in a way because it was like going from welding and falling away from the church to a normal person probably would have just been like, oh, cool, I can go back to church and I'm going to be a good Christian. And I was like, nah, I'm just going to scrap everything and just fully pursue this. So that's kind of my story.
Man, that's really, really cool. But I want to ask this, like, do you regret doing it the way that you did it at all?
In terms of coming to school or
Yeah. In terms
Christianity,
of coming to school and continuing your pattern of schooling to this day.
yeah, there's times where I look back and think, man, I had it all in the
Mm.
job that I was in because 401k, full benefits, job security, like crazy, and everything there. And part of me thinks, what if I continued with that?
Mm.
And that you can always play the what if game in
Yeah.
Christianity. You can always play the what if game in life. But when I look at where I'm at now, working at a school that I love, being able to teach books that I love, and being able to grow even more so in that, you never really hit this climax of knowledge. You're just always learning more and more. And to be in a position where I can continue to learn and grow, it's really become a hobby and a passion. And then ultimately, that was one of the biggest things that allowed me to marry Natalie, I think, which is one of the biggest blessings that I have in life is my wife. If I was still a worldly person or even a worldly pursuit, I doubt there would have been a chance. If you, and to anyone listening, if you look at a picture between me and my wife, you can tell I married way out of my league. So I, I had to make up for it somewhere. And I think spirituality is one of those things, just having a common faith. And when we dated, our intent to date was to be with someone that could encourage me to God more and more. So um, she looked past all the physical appearance and just saw the core, I guess.
That's really awesome. I don't think you're a bad looking man. I don't want you to get that impression. So tell me a little bit about how you were received back into the church. How did people treat you? Because like you said, I mean, Bear Valley was kind of home. And so, did those people know you were experiencing what you experienced, or was it kind of a, oh, Tyler's this good kid, and no, Tyler's back? Or maybe talk a little bit about how that process went, because there might be someone listening to this that maybe they're not in the church right now and they're anxious about coming back because of how they might be received. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, I was up in Boulder, which is about an hour away from Bear Valley. So I'd been disconnected from the Bear Valley family for about 9 to 10 months, but I
Mm,
just wasn't here. And I would pop in every once in a while, but it was like a Wednesday night, and then I would just kind of leave town afterward. Uh, Reception wasn't really a big issue. I never went forward. I don't know if I probably should have, but
mm,
I just I was kind of a quiet sinner, if that's ever a title. Like I was living a life of sin that was quiet to the grand majority of the church. And so when I left, I don't know if anyone really knew everything that I was going through, or everything that I had done, or everything that was taking place. Um, but I think people could tell that there was a paradigm shift in my focus, my mentality. A lot of people who knew me knew, I mean, they just saw this kid, seventh grade, skateboarding around, hanging out. And then I made it very evident to people that I was just in the pursuit of money. So
mm,
Paul would say in Philippians chapter 3 that for some, those who walk as enemies of the cross, their God is their belly. It's not that their belly has literally just become a God. It's that whatever their appetite is, whatever they are seeking, whatever they're hungry for, that becomes their God. And that was definitely me, walking as an enemy of the cross, pursuing that God of my appetite, which was money. So when I came back to the church, I enrolled in school and I was here, and so people kind of knew me as a kid, but then they were watching this different motion take place. Not only that, but they started to see that there's a difference in me because my first year of school, I had like $40 a month of support. It was hardly anything.
yeah.
So what I was doing is I was just burning through my savings. All the money that I had from welding, I had a savings account, and I was just burning through that to be in school. So I think people could tell that there was a different pursuit in life rather than just career or money. Not to say that money is a bad pursuit; it can
Yeah.
just sometimes be a distraction from everything else.
Hmm. Well, and
So,
with going to a preaching school, I mean, money, and it's one of those things that you kind of sacrifice, and you
oh yeah,
can't really be on a pursuit of money and going through a program like Bear Valley. It just
yeah.
doesn't work.
But the church was incredibly encouraging for the most part. I mean, I don't know if I ever, maybe to my face, I never had anyone come up and say, "I can't believe the things that you've done. I can't believe that you're trying to be a preacher now." I mean, no backlash. If anything,
Mm,
people were just so excited. They were uh, proud to know kind of where I was to where I've come. And I
mm-hmm,
still get a little bit of that. I have people who kind of pull me aside, and I hate this portion of it because it sounds like boasting or pride, but really what
mm,
this should be is it's amazing what God can do with you if you just give it all to God.
exactly. Yeah.
If you say, "Okay, God, I'm going to be the clay now. I'm done trying to be the pot maker. I'm done trying to be the clay molder. That's your job.
Hmm.
So make me to what you can make me, and I'll just follow suit." And
Yeah.
it's recognizable when people go through that transformation.
Hmm. And it's so encouraging to have those people in your life that let you know, hey man, this is so cool. I recognize this. I see you. I see the difference. And honestly, that's a huge reason why I wanted to do this, is so these people, you can look back at your interview 3 4 years ago and see how different you are then from how you used to be. And so I think there's a ton of beauty in that. And also just be that person, like be that encourager, man. Cause I mean, you needed it when you were coming back.
Yeah,
I'm sure you needed that because, um, in your own mind, you were probably telling yourself, what are you doing? Look at what you've thrown away. Look at what you're sacrificing. And it's like your conscience did that enough for you. You didn't need anyone else to tell you that. And so
yeah,
I'm glad you didn't
that's
have
exactly
that negative experience.
yeah. And I know people have had negative experiences too, and
Hmm.
that really bums me out because that's not the church as a whole.
Right.
You've got people who are willing in their life to hold grudges for their entire life, and I'm sorry, but what a sad way to live.
Oh man.
Um, I mean, God says you're forgiven, so I should view that person as forgiven. And it's such an encouragement for people to just see where you've come from, and then encourage that way. And I
Hmm.
received quite a bit of encouragement through that. And I would say that's what kept me going. There was actually a point, I don't know if you knew this, there was a point in between my first and second year at Bear Valley. It was a summer. Things weren't going great. I was pretty discouraged. Again, kind of some things from past experiences were coming to the surface. And I thought, I have no business being in ministry. I have no business preaching. Um, I don't need to be doing any of this. I just need to go back to welding and be a Christian, which is fine. Like, I mean, I can still
Yeah.
be saved. I can still go to heaven being a Christian who welds. That's okay. Um, but there were a few people who just really encouraged me, and it wasn't a lot. It was like three people who were main encouragers who just said, "Ministry needs you. The church needs you. God needs you. We need more people with your story to come into the church and make people realize that preachers aren't this sterilized specimen who were just born with
Yeah.
all this preaching knowledge. Like, I'm a welder who knew like three Bible verses prior to coming to school. I had no business coming to school and being a student. I mean,
Same.
my
Same.
high school GPA was like 1.8, and
Yeah.
the total number of classes that I missed in high school were like 640, and I think the max capacity was like 650, and then they would fail you out of high school. Like, I had
Yeah.
no business being a student, and man, God can do awesome things.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad to hear that because I definitely felt like one of those people. I was like, man, I just got accepted into Bear Valley. And if you knew the kind of, and obviously there was personal motivation to be like, hey, don't be like how you've always been. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that I'm not the other one, the only one. And I've heard that from a few other people. That's so funny. All right, cool. So you've got this really cool story of how you get back into the church. You are a current teacher. I mean, you're super involved with the congregation. Natalie's involved with the congregation. Maybe what's next for you? What are some ways that you feel like you can take what's happened in the past to use that to motivate you and push you? Is this kind of your direction for ministry that you want to be in for the rest of time? Do you want to go back into pulpit? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just kind of, it's very much an informal ministry what I'm doing right now, because people ask you like, "Oh, are you the preacher?" Or some people say, "Are you the pastor?" No, I'm not old enough to be a pastor, but I think right now is just kind of working on myself still, and that's
Hmm.
probably going to be a lifelong process. I briefly mentioned that I'm at Denver Seminary right now taking classes. That's been a lot of fun. Um, but the pursuit is eventually doctoral work. Again, you look at my high school transcript and you think this dude's not going for his PhD, but um, that's the goal. My degree right now is in Old Testament, so I love studying Old Testament, love studying Hebrew. Um, so definitely working in that direction, and kind of just informally filling the gaps wherever I see there are gaps. So I've always prayed to God, just open up doors, and wherever you want me or wherever you can use me, that's where I'll be. I
That's
think for right now
wonderful.
it'll be Bear Valley for a long time.
Yeah.
I love it here. I love the students. I love being engaged with the work that you send out preachers so often. I mean, every year there are preachers who are leaving the school and going out to different works, and in turn, they're
Hmm.
influencing hundreds of lives on their own. So playing a role there is really cool. Being around the staff here is great because they're all way older than me. Don't tell them I said that, but they're all way older. But it's cool to glean the wisdom. I mean, I'm 27,
Mm.
and probably the next oldest staff member is like, I don't know, 50s,
Wow.
50s, maybe late 50s. So
They
there's
are a
quite
bunch
an
of old
age.
men, huh?
Yeah, man. I'll take naps and stuff. I take
Yeah.
naps every day.
Yeah.
But so I think just kind of staying here,
Cool.
and just letting God still work on me, education, and life wise.
Yeah. Well, I'm very thankful for you and the work that you're doing there. I know that I'm sure it's very rewarding for you to be able to give back to that program that gave so much to you. And so that's a huge blessing. And I hope that you continue to do it. I mean, that's selfishly speaking. I hope you stay there and get more classes to teach and get more opportunities to pour into people because I think you're very talented at it. And so I know you don't like compliments, so I'll move on from that. But maybe as we kind of wrap things up a little bit, talk about some ways that you feel like you can encourage someone who might be listening to this. Maybe what encouragement would you offer to a Christian listening to this? And then we'll come back around and maybe offer some encouragement to a non Christian who might be listening to this.
Yeah, and I'll say this not as a direct plug for Bear Valley. Obviously, I work here, and people know that. But I think people need to be encouraged more about considering a life of ministry. I was never encouraged ever in my teen years or anywhere else by anyone directly. Like I went to preacher training camps. I was involved in, we had a program called Young Lions for elementary kids who wanted to get up and do a talk. I was encouraged in those ways, but no one ever directly influenced me and sat me down and said, you need to be in ministry. I don't know if that would have changed anything. I probably would have just blown them off and said, like, nah, I'm good. Like, I'll make
Yeah.
more money as a welder than as a preacher. But I think if you're a Christian and you're considering ministry, really give it more thought and prayer. If you've ever even had like the inkling of a thought, like maybe I would like to have a full time life of ministry, man. If I can be the first encourager, then let me tell you, it's awesome. I mean, there is no life more rewarding, in my opinion, than ministry. And I'm an informal minister, meaning that I'm not in the pulpit every Sunday. I'm not doing daily Bible studies with people off the street. I get to be engaged in those every once in a while. But ministry is really just being in God's kingdom full time and encouraging others to get into his kingdom. So that's encouraging. Number one, that would be, hey, consider this, pray about it. And number two, I would say, don't ever underestimate what God can do with you. Man, if there's one thing that scripture has taught me, it's that God has dealt with a lot of boneheads and done awesome things through them. So
Yeah.
you might think to yourself, man, I almost failed out of high school. Uh, I'm not an academic person at all. I don't need to be studying at a formal level. I don't need to be doing all that kind of stuff. Don't discount it. You might think, man, I'm just barely a Christian. Like I do enough just to bear the name Christian. C.S. Lewis will talk about how he hates that we have taken Christianity to be a label because you've got these different categories of like a good Christian versus a bad Christian. It's like, no, it should just be Christian. Like, shouldn't be a
Yeah.
distinction. But sometimes we think to ourselves, like, I'm borderline Christian. Well, don't discount what God can do with you because sometimes we become our worst enemy in doing that. And Satan wins that match where I think, I'm just trying to struggle along. I'm not thriving in my spirituality. I'm just there. Well, God can use you, and God will use you if you allow Him. And it's amazing the things that He can do, the amazing the things that He will reveal to you in terms of work and doors open. 2 years ago, I got to go to Cambodia and use my welding skills over there. So during the day, I taught a class on spiritual formation. And then in the evenings, I taught a course on how to weld. Well, what
That's
was
so
once
fun.
being from God is now something that is working in harmony with God. So never discount what you can do in God's kingdom.
That's cool. I didn't know that. That is really really special, and I think people need to hear that, man. It's like you have these different people who are in these different professions who they're really good at it. They don't feel like they can leave that to go into full time ministry, and that's okay. Like that is okay that you are a welder. It is okay that you are a plumber. You're a Christian who plumbs, or you're a Christian who welds, and you can use that. You can meet people where they're at. I almost would say they have the opportunity to be more effective with people in the world since they're in those professions and the people that they get to interact with. And so
Oh yeah.
that's cool.
Well,
I'm really happy to hear about that.
I made the point in my sermon a couple weeks ago that people look at me and they'll say like, "Wow, it's so amazing that you're able to quit your job and to have the strength to now go into ministry." I'd argue the opposite, man. I was weak in my job, and
Mm,
I found out that working secularly drove me away from God. So it wasn't strong of me to quit my job and go into ministry. I just recognized that if I'm in a full time secular job away from God's people and away from all that, that I can't thrive spiritually. Um,
yeah.
so some people are in that position, but yeah, man, there are so many in the church right now who are just pillars of the faith, who
Oh,
can
yeah.
work in a full time secular job and they crush it. I mean, some of the best Christians I know are those guys who are out there working in the field
Yeah.
every day. That's awesome. I mean, keep it up because that's something that I
Seriously.
couldn't do. I mean, I
Yeah, yeah,
can't.
man. You're better than me. Promise you that. Yeah.
But I just really appreciate how the church works in such a variety of different ways. And God's given us our talents, and we can definitely use that for right or wrong. And just find out how God can use your talents for His will, and you'll be amazed at the doors that He opens up.
What about some encouragement to a non-Christian that might be listening to this?
Yeah, that's tricky. I guess number one is I was walking that path for the better part of 2 months as somewhat of a non-Christian. Again, there was that time period in my life where I scrapped everything. I started from zero, and I was okay with not being a member of the Church of Christ. Um, but my main pursuit was I want to know truth, and I want to know what's right. I mean, I went deep. I looked at Quran, I looked at Book of Mormon, I looked at all the different apostolic creeds. I mean, I went through kind of like a mini church history class, going through some things. The biggest encouragement for me is that objective truth, definite truth, it's out there. All you need to do is find it and kind of latch onto it. And so for me, I'm very thankful because my family and friends, they're Church of Christ. But I had to wrestle with that in my mind as far as if I come to a conclusion that's not Church of Christ, I'm going to have to say goodbye to probably all my friends, my family. That would be a very weird, I mean, that's a weird Thanksgiving. I mean, if you're raised
Mhm.
Church of Christ and now you're going to your family, you're like, hey, by the way, I'm this. That's a
Yeah.
struggle. But I was willing to do that. So sometimes we need to sacrifice ourselves to find truth. What I mean by that is sacrifice our comfort zone in order to find truth. So if you're a non Christian, your comfort zone very may well be is this idea of not being accountable for anything. I don't want to be a Christian because that means that I have to stop drinking. I don't want to be a Christian because that means I have to stop doing the things that I do. But man, when you're in truth, it's a world of peace
Mm.
because you know where you're headed, you know who God is, and you know where you stand with that God. So it's quite the encouragement to know truth. So to all the non-Christians out there, know that there is truth. Seek it, and you'll find it. Something that Jesus said in one of his sermons.
I loved what you said about when you find the truth, there's peace. I want to ask you, maybe this is backtracking, but in those 2 months of seeking, what was that feeling when you were like, this is truth? Like, what was that overall emotion that you felt?
It was crazy because during the 2 months, I knew that there was God, so I had somewhere to start.
Hmm.
I even entertained the idea of, and this is kind of where I would argue that different religions have their different gods, even though they may claim Christianity. Your God is different definition wise than the God of the Church of Christ. Even though there is one God overall, these different religions kind of make for themselves different gods and they follow after those things. So it was kind of a time of darkness. It was like I was in darkness and then went even deeper into darkness
Mm.
because at this point it was just this world of unknown as far as okay, there are so many religions out there. One of them has to be right.
Hmm.
And then it was almost like proverbially speaking, not eating or drinking for 2 months. I mean, roughly 2 months. It wasn't like 60
Right.
days and,
Yeah.
oh, there's truth. But
60
through this
days
time,
guide to truth. Yeah.
and then Church of Christ was honestly one of the last denominations, not denomination, one of the last bodies of believers that I studied. And I said, here's what they believe. I know what they believe. I've been raised it. And I was just lining it up with scripture. And I said, that's it. I mean, how they view salvation, how they worship, how they go about this life, what they believe about the life that is to come, what they believe of grace and repentance and all that. I mean, so many things that I went through and just kind of had this list that I made up on a little loose leaf paper. And when I sat there, it was almost just kind of like I don't even know if there are any words in the human language that can describe the emotion felt, but peace,
Yeah.
excitement. There was a sense of energy that was brought back into me, maybe going with life. And now I'm this kind of new convert and I'm stoked thinking like, this is awesome. Like there's truth out there. So I'm going and telling friends and they're like, well, yeah, like that's why we're in the church. But yeah, but this is like, you don't understand how valuable this is. So it's just a flood of emotions.
Very cool. And my prayer is that others can discover that because that is just such a once in a lifetime moment almost.
Oh yeah.
Those emotions and that realization of truth and those aha moments, if you want to call it that. And so my prayer is that through this someone can listen to this and hear that from your experience and seek that, and
Mhm.
maybe if they're seeking that, um, they they want to experience that. And so um, if you're listening to this and you're that person, seek us out, man. Seriously, talk to us. We've got all the time in the world for you. I know Tyler would like to talk to you. I'd like to talk to you. um, yeah, we want that for you, and that's why we do this, and that's why we are in ministry. We want to help people grow. We want to teach people, and because we think that's the greatest thing we can do while we're here. So, Tyler, man, I appreciate you. Is there anything else that you want to say or talk about?
I think that's it.
All
Just
right.
hopefully it was encouraging to anyone listening. I mean, hopefully it kind of hit two different listeners, those who are in the
Yeah.
church. I mean, take comfort because, man, that's the truth. Uh, but maybe discover that truth for yourself if you're a generational Christian like I was. I was just going with the motions. And when push came to shove, those motions totally collapsed when
Mm.
I was on an island by myself. But know that there's truth. And if you're a non Christian, man, search because you'll find it. I have no doubt that if you search with a true heart, you'll find truth.
Well, dude, I really appreciate it. It was good to catch up with you and talk with you, and I'm thankful that you came on the podcast today and joined me.
Thanks for
Well,
having me.
guys,
This was fun.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining us on another episode of The Christian Next to You. I hope that you were encouraged by this. I hope that you can walk away with some encouragement and maybe some more knowledge about a certain topic. And I hope that you can find peace this week. Maybe something that Tyler said encouraged you and brought you peace this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited to see you guys in the next episode. With that being said, I love you. God loves you. We'll talk to you later.